with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, February 22nd, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Naomi Klein, author of How to Change Everything, The Young Human's Guide to Protecting the Planet and Each Other, and why Texas Republicans fear the new Green Deal. Meanwhile, the U.S. at 500,000 COVID deaths as infections and hospitalizations slow. Supreme Court just declared, or I should say declined, to block the Manhattan DA's grand jury from getting 8 years of Donald Trump's tax returns. Meanwhile, demands grow for Texas energy debt forgiveness. Susan Collins to join Joe Manchin in opposing Neera Tanden's nomination to the Office of Management and Budget. House, meanwhile, is on track to pass $1.9 trillion COVID relief later this week. Amazon reportedly offering net resignation bonuses to stop union organizing in Alabama. Trump looking forward to CPAC this weekend, where he will announce that he is the presumptive Republican nominee in 2024. Meanwhile, Dominion Voting files a $1.3 billion defamation suit versus the MyPillow guy. A deathbed letter claims that the NYPD and FBI were involved in Malcolm X's assassination. And lastly, the Lincoln Project completely implodes. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigeland. And Emma, of course, last week, I was not joining you, and I have received nothing but rave reviews on your helming the ship solo. So thank you very much for holding down the fort last week.
Well, that's very kind of you, Sam, and viewers. It was really a lot of fun, and I got to do my own thing, tear the place down, so to speak.
Well, I'm a little bit concerned about what's going on in the studio, but with all that, with that said, we will endeavor to persevere on that. Meanwhile, let's get to one of the things, obviously, I missed last week was this horrible situation in Texas where the power grid had failed, essentially, in multiple ways, leaving people without electricity in very cold weather. We don't know any numbers right now in terms of deaths, or I should say we don't know any final count. Just a horrific situation. And we'll be talking to Naomi Klein about the reaction to it. But here is a prime example, and it's fascinating. It really is fascinating to see how coordinated this message was and how quickly it was deployed. And we will talk to Naomi Klein about the implications of it. But here's Ron Johnson on Fox Business News with Maria Bartiromo. Here he is on yesterday.
What we saw in Texas certainly shows what folly the Green New Deal would be, how unreliable wind and solar power generation really is, and how it needs fossil fuel backup. We've also learned how vulnerable our grid is to, again, the unreliable green energy, but also potentially to geomagnetic disturbance from the sun, solar winds, and also potentially EMP attacks. So
it's interesting. If you were to take Ron Johnson literally, you would assume that something like 80% of the energy that Texas relies on comes from wind and solar, and 20% comes from fossil fuels. In fact, it's the opposite. But the real problem, of course, we know is there was a complete lack of regulation. The state deregulated decades ago, and was, or I should say, about 20 years ago, a little less, and or more, I should say, decades ago.
Well, basically, they created their own system to skirt federal regulation in the 30s by not making it cross state lines. So they had complete jurisdiction over it, which allowed them to cut corners. And again, you point out that small figure of wind turbines. If they had regulation, or if it wasn't such a profit motive, they could have had technology that would defreeze wind turbines, even if, that was the primary source, which it's not, obviously.
Of course. The under regulation, they would be required to expend money on things that they may not use every day. So much of this, and we talk about this with Naomi Klein, so much of this reminds me of Katrina, where the buses that FEMA had standing by ostensibly to evacuate people from New Orleans, they had outsourced it. They had privatized this to a contractor who then subcontracted. And the buses could have been waiting outside the city. They were about an hour and a half away. They could have been waiting outside the city for the go. But instead of doing that, because what if they didn't need them? Then that would cut into their profit margin. This is exactly the same type of dynamic.
And we're seeing it in COVID too, with the for-profit hospitals. They don't have the capacity because that would have cut into their profit margins.
Exactly. Can't have any empty beds during the course of normal things because that would inhibit our profit. If we were to have those extra beds in the case of an emergency or a spike or high, record low temperatures, and they know they will get away with this. This is just simply the way that they do business and they make money. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll be talking to Naomi Klein back in just a moment. Hey, folks, a couple of words from our sponsors. First, Hunt-A-Killer. It's the murder mystery subscription box. That's the most exciting date night you can do at home. Now, Matt and his girlfriend have been doing this, apparently, and he did the same one that I did, which was Curtain Call. And, well, first off, let me just explain what Hunt-A-Killer is. It is essentially a whodunit game. You can do this with people who are physically present with you. You could do it with them, via Zoom. You could do it at your own pace, two different people working on it. You decode ciphers, you examine clues, you solve puzzles. And what happens is they deliver you something every month. You can also speed it up if you want. Some people can't wait. You get documents, you get evidence, you get audio recordings, you get case files, you eliminate suspects, you identify murder weapons, you crack the case, you catch the killer. You can even, like I say, you can get on Zoom, mix it in with your drinking, your Zoom cocktail hours or whatever you people are doing these days. I have no idea. But for me, it's been a fun thing to do with my teen daughter because it's one way to get her. It's really, so far, probably the only way that I have found to get her off her screen devices. I guess there's some activities that she does that are not on the screen, to be fair.
Yeah.
But Hunt to Killer has 100,000 active subscribers. They have over 2,000 5-star reviews. Part of the proceeds for every box goes to a Cold Case Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping with real-life cold cases. In fact, that's what Curtain Call was about. This woman found basically a mummified body. And it was, she was an actress. This is all fictional, incidentally. But it's set, you go back in time, essentially, to solve the case like you would if you were trying to solve a case from the 1930s. And it's a good pretense to, give my child some history. And it's fun. So it's fun to do for date night, fun to do with your kids, older kids. I wouldn't do this with a 7-year-old, but it's because it's also hard. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority. Use the promo code majority. Get 20% off your first box. Again, use the code majority. You get 20% off. Find out if you have what it takes to hunt a killer. This is funny because I was thinking about this the other day. We're about to change seasons, hopefully, as it snows outside right now. But if you want to make a change this season, Stitch Fix can help you choose new pieces you love. I've got to do this because, I'll say it in a second. But what Stitch Fix is they offer clothing. It's hand-selected by expert stylists. They pick it out based upon your unique size, your unique style, your budget. It's the easy solution to finding what makes you look and feel your best. You try on pieces at home before you buy, you keep your favorites, you send back the rest. You pay just a $20 styling fee for each box. They send you a box full of different articles of clothing, and that gets credited towards any of the pieces you keep. There's no subscription required. You try Stitch Fix once, or you can set up automatic deliveries. Shipping, returns, exchanges, super easy, super free. Well, just free. I don't know what super free means. But a prepaid return envelope is included in your Stitch Fix box. Super easy to return. Stitch Fix has styles and clothing for women, men, and kids. They ship all over the U.S., and they're available in the U.K. as well. So check it out. For me, this is what's interesting. So I got these Chuka boots, and I think I got it like literally a year ago today. I don't know if it was today, but it was around now. It's February. And I got the Chuka boots, and I was super excited. And I was going to, wear them out on town. And I've worn them, but like I'm not going out on the town because of the pandemic. And I got a mock turtleneck. I sent that back because I don't do those. But I was like on the fence of this Pilsen thermal white long sleeve shirt because it's a little bit of a throwback for me back in my salad days as a slacker. Now I'm wearing the thing like 4 days a week. I know it's not. And when I'm not like in my show uniform, I'm wearing it constantly. So I got to get new. It's just weird. It occurred to me today, like I wasn't sure about this. And now it's like literally my favorite piece of clothing. I don't wear any other piece of clothing. But you can get started today at stitchfix.com/majority. You'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/majority for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. stitchfix.com/majority. And lastly, one of the things I also have done over COVID is make sure that I am taking vitamins because I want to remain healthy. I want to try and come on the other side of this, not, just completely depleted. Well, you deserve to know what you're putting in your bodies and why, especially when it comes to taking something every day. Ritual's clean, vegan-friendly multivitamin, formulated with high-quality nutrients in bioavailable forms your body can actually use. There are no shady extras. Ritual's delayed release capsule design delivers high quality nutrients, including vitamin D3 in just 2 daily pills. That is the big every time I go see my doctor, he's always like, you are deficient in vitamin D. Well, you'll always know what nutrients you take and where they come from, thanks to Ritual's one-of-a-kind visible supply chain. In other words, you go to the site and they will tell you where everything in that vitamin comes from. Now available for women, men, and teens, Ritual multivitamins are scientifically developed to help support different life stages. Your multivitamins are delivered to your door every month with free shipping, and that's the other thing. Cannot tell you how many times I have bought a bottle of multivitamins, taken them, done a good job about being disciplined about taking them every day. It runs out, and then I forget. Boom. Well, now you don't have to worry about it because they're delivered to your door every month. Reminds you, take them. You can start, snooze, or cancel your subscription anytime. Super easy. If you don't love Ritual within your first month, they'll refund your first order. Like I say, for me, I forget to do these things. I'm not terribly disciplined about this stuff. The monthly thing reminds me to not let it wane because you got to get into a habit. It takes 30 days to develop this type of habit, they say. For me, it takes 15 years. And even then. But that's what I like about it for Ritual. I mean, that's I mean, I've never really been on a vitamin regime as much before. So
you mean regimen?
It's great. Huh?
You mean regimen?
Yeah, regiment. Okay.
All right. Well,
Either one.
are
it's
you
not
the
going to
king?
necessarily change my addiction, but yeah,
Are you
might
the king
be right.
of vitamins?
Anyways, you get key nutrients without the BS with Ritual. Ritual's offering my listeners 10% off during your first 3 months. Visit ritual.com/majority. Start your Ritual today. You can check out the supply line's really interesting. All right. Don't forget, your support makes this show possible. If you become a member today at jointhemajorityreport.com, you not only get the free show, you get it commercial free. And you get the fun half every day. Jointhemajorityreport.com. All right, quick break, and then we'll be back with Naomi Klein. We're back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the Zoom. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program Naomi Klein. She's a senior correspondent at The Intercept. She's also the Gloria Steinem Endowed Chair at Rutgers University. Her new book, How to Change Everything, The Young Human's Guide to Protecting the Planet and Each Other, will be published tomorrow. And she'll be launching the book at the Brooklyn Public Library virtually. In
other words, I'll just be sitting in this chair.
It's too bad too, because I would have loved to have actually physically gone. But and you'll be in conversation with the Sunrise New York City Youth and Toccata Iron Eyes from Standing Rock tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern. Folks can check that out at the brooklynlibrary.org. It's BKLYN. I don't know why they couldn't spell out Brooklyn. But Naomi Klein, welcome. We're here, of course, with Emma Vigeland. And I wanted to talk about specifically your piece in the Times today, because it had occurred to me. I was on vacation last week. And as I was watching this, it occurred to me that I was not hearing the classic, we shouldn't politicize this. Mm-hmm. And your piece really sort of made it clear why.
Yeah, no. Well, great to be with you, Sam and Emma. There was this symphony of voices from the Republican side, clearly a coordinated talking point that they were going to get out of the gate and politicize the hell out of this with blaming the Green New Deal, blaming renewable energy. They had all of their memes ready with frozen wind turbines and snow-covered solar panels, and it was just like, just within a couple of hours, we were hearing it from Greg Abbott, Rick Perry, Ted Cruz. They were all, pounding the same drum. And I think that, it's very clear why. I think they're terrified of a Green New Deal, which actually has the potential to solve many of Texas's huge intersecting overlapping problems, which is the whole point of a Green New Deal. So they had to deflect right out of the gate.
It was a we'll circle back to this, but it was just fascinating to see. And I think, one of the things I really want to touch on that is this notion that in your piece about having these ideas, having ideas at the ready for a crisis. I mean, of course, I can't imagine, or I should hope that we don't have too many people watching us who haven't read The Shock Doctrine by now. But we were also just, before we started recording, we were talking about your piece that you and I discussed 17 years ago.
When we were young.
A little scary about year zero and referencing Baghdad. Explain just for a moment, if you will.
Just to be clear, like that piece, there was a piece that came out in Harper's in 2004, and it was called Baghdad Year Zero, Pillaging Iraq in Pursuit of a Neocon Utopia. And that was the sort of piece that turned into the shock doctrine. That was my kind of, I guess, my wake up call about this is a kind of this is what I thought at the time was a new tactic of harnessing the power of shock and trauma. In that case, the shock and awe military invasion of Iraq, that was how it was branded, to push through so-called economic shock therapy, to use this kind of window of opportunity that opens up in the aftermath of a hugely traumatic event to do things you would not be able to do otherwise. So what I was reporting on for Harper's was this push to sell off all of Iraq's state-owned industries, to roll back labor protections. I mean, not to say Saddam Hussein's Iraq was some socialist utopia, but it did have some protections for workers, and it did prevent foreign investors from coming into the country and buying up state-owned industries. And so that was what the Bush administration was determined to do in that window of opportunity. And in the process, they actually ignited a very forceful Iraqi resistance, and the rest is history.
Have they almost kind of perfected this too? I mean, the level of coordination that we've seen, like it's almost like they use, as you cite in your piece, Katrina, Iraq, all of these other past disasters as a trial run, and the machine is so well oiled. You had the Wall Street Journal and Breitbart within hours come out with this anti-green energy push in terms of messaging. And then, of course, Fox followed. And then really, I think Abbott, Cruz, Dan Patrick, they were going on Fox News regurgitating their own talking points. So it's almost as if they have it down to a science at this point.
Yeah, but I think we're getting kind of meta here. Because what we're seeing with attacking the Green New Deal is not what I've described as the shock doctrine. I mean, the shock doctrine is using the window to push through privatization, deregulation, austerity, the whole neoliberal playbook, right? The problem is in Texas, they've already implemented the entire playbook, and that is what produced the crisis. And what they're terrified of is that the reality of the effects of their policies will spur a progressive response to disaster. And, in the shock doctrine, I go back and really look at the origins of the strategy and exploiting crisis is not a new idea. I mean, Machiavelli talks about it. But I'm talking about this within the context of neoliberal history.
Right.
And I often quote Milton Friedman in an essay he wrote in 1982 for an anniversary edition of Capitalism and Freedom, where he says, only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When the crisis occurs, the change depends on the ideas that are lying around. That's a key word, lying around. And he says that, I believe, is our basic function. And here he's talking about not just right-wing economists, but the whole infrastructure of right-wing think tanks that he was intimately connected to: Cato, American Enterprise Institute, Heritage. Get your ideas ready, store them like canned goods and toilet paper for when the disaster hits, and then you pounce, right? And what's interesting about that is that Friedman was obsessed with the New Deal. And he believed that everything went wrong when the market crash happened in 1929. People saw the cruelties of this economic system, both the instability and its willingness to allow so many people to fall into such desperate poverty. And that was the shock that brought about what Friedman hated more than anything else, which was the original New Deal. And I quote him in a letter he wrote to Augusto Pinochet in the 70s, saying that history took a wrong turn, he says, in your country as well as mine in the 1930s, when people got the idea that they could do good with other people's money. So what they are terrified of is that their shock doctrine strategy has been tried, failed. Their ideas aren't lying around. They're lying in ruin. And they're afraid of another New Deal. They're afraid of the Green New Deal. They're afraid that we're the ones with the ideas now to actually solve the real problems. And that actually gives me some hope. You know, right. I mean, I think that's interesting. It's very different.
All right, so let's go backwards just a little bit, because you mentioned Pinochet, and it was the first thing that you know, because I think when we spoke in 2004, I don't know if we used the term neoliberal, frankly. I mean, it's possible, but and when we're talking about this type of neoliberalism, we are talking very sort of almost strict definitional Mount Peleron type of stuff, where there was a specific agenda set out following World War II to make sure that something like the New Deal doesn't happen again. Yeah. And it took, they had it, maybe it was 30 years basically until you get to Chile, where they had the opportunity. They build up these ideas and there's their opportunity to deploy it. I mean, I think Iraq was probably the next sort of biggest single moment where they had that opportunity again, which was to implement, you know, to really sort of like really lay this project out. And it's
there were other ones in between, you know, the collapse of the former Soviet Union, like other right. major shocks, right, which create this kind of blank slate, a state, or what they imagine to be a blank slate. You know, whenever anyone uses that phrase, blank slate, blank sheet, you know, that's when you need to be very afraid. But yeah, they were ready, not just with the ideas, but with the people. This was really important, right? As far as Latin America was concerned, in Latin America, they talk about the Chicago boys being the economists who worked with who worked with Pinochet and other dictatorships to impose these radical privatizations. That was only possible because there was a 20-year process at the University of Chicago where hundreds of young economic students were brought from different parts of the world, but particularly Latin America, hundreds of young Latin American economists to be trained under Friedman and other far-right economists. It was originally funded by the State Department, then it was funded by the Ford Foundation. And so when that shock came, they had their personnel ready. You know, Pinochet had the guns, but it was the Chicago boys who wrote what was called the Brick, which was this very thick manual for what they should do with the economy immediately after the coup.
And so the how much of, and so we have now sort of almost gone full circle, where they have had the opportunity to, and particularly in Texas, to implement these things. And it's sort of like the dog that catches the car, right? and this, the front of their face is now smashed in because they've run out of these ideas. I mean,
I mean, how desperate do you have to be in Texas to claim that the Green New Deal produced this? I mean, Texas is as far from the Green New Deal as you could possibly imagine. It's a petro state, right? Yes, they have some wind turbines, but the vast majority of their energy comes from gas and coal. It was that infrastructure that froze up because of you have the collision of fossil fuels, successful decades of deregulation, not telling the fossil fuel companies that they need to winterize, telling them that they didn't need to do anything to prepare for a crisis. They just needed to maximize their profits and do whatever it took to make the most money in the short term. And then you have climate disruption, which is intimately linked to this ideology, because the reason we have failed to act in the face of knowing about this crisis and decades of expert testimony before Congress is that this crisis lands on our lap, right? And this is what my book, This Changes Everything, was about. James Hansen testifies before Congress, the country's leading climate expert, and says in 1988 that he can now say with, I think he said 99-degree certainty, that humans were causing the planet's climate to change. This is 1988, the worst possible moment for this to happen. It's the year before the Berlin Wall collapses. Francis Fukuyama is about to declare history over. Right. Margaret Thatcher has said there is no alternative. Is the high point of the free market revolution. And that is a disaster when it comes to climate change, because if we're going to take this crisis seriously, we have to regulate corporations. We have to hold on to the levers of power within our states, including control over energy, and not just hand it over to the free market, because we need to get to renewable energy in a hurry. We have to question all the fundamentals. And of course, we need to invest in the public sphere, which is exactly what they're telling us we can't do. So Texas is in this like overused phrase, but a perfect storm of all of these crises born of the successful implementation of these policies hitting all at once.
I'm trying to look back over the past 20 years where we had similar moments like this that did not create the panic that I think we have seen from these Republicans out of Texas over the past week that Emma just described as a sort of like coordinated response that was born out of panic, right? Because you can't go to the well. There's no other, you can't redeploy what has already been deployed there. And I'm looking at, you can, but not so much in Texas. Like, you can't say like, we're going to double up on, we need to have
never
more.
Say never, Sam. They can always make things worse. That's
at least they didn't feel confident they could.
No.
Right. And so, but I'm thinking like the financial crisis, which they didn't have the same panic that came from that in the same way. I'm thinking Kansas, where they had the opportunity to implement the supply side economics, like the tax cutting, the whole Laffer curve, the idea that this is going to increase revenues, and it failed miserably. I'm thinking austerity in 2010. That was, it failed even worse in Europe because it was implemented more,
right.
But there wasn't the same sort of like, this is just so naked, their panic. Right. And what do you attribute that to?
So what I attribute it to is the presence of an alternative political program, which is really what is different than previous shocks that have exposed the failures of this economic project. I think about Katrina, 2005. Once again, a collision of heavy weather of the kind that we are seeing more and more of that link to climate change, slamming headlong into a deliberately neglected, austerity-starved public sphere, overlaid with systemic racism and white supremacy. And so you have the storm slamming into the levees that there had been years of warnings, repair them, they're crumbling, ignored. The levees break, they breach. Fox News is talking about people being looters when they're actually just trying to get water and food. They're talking about animals in the Superdome, and it's just people trying to survive. People are abandoned for days. You remember FEMA couldn't seem to find New Orleans for 5 days.
It had been fully privatized, not fully, but it had been extremely privatized after and Bill Clinton. There's not a lot of times I say positive things about Bill Clinton, but FEMA under Bill Clinton had been built up significantly. And under George W. Bush, it had been privatized rather quickly.
Privatized and handed to totally inept cronies. Remember Michael Brown? I mean, it was one of those moments. And in the shock doctrine, and I did this again in the New York Times piece, I quoted all of these sort of free market zealots who suddenly lost their religion, looking at what it actually means to have no government. And all the people who took so much delight in talking about, drowning the government in the bathtub. Jonah Goldberg was saying, okay, where's the government? In a crisis, you actually want the government to saddle up, was his phrase. You had neocons talking about how the fall of New Orleans levees was going to be for Reaganism what the collapse of the Berlin Wall was for Soviet communism, because it revealed its failures. And so a lot of us, there was a moment there when that happened, that a lot of us thought, okay, this is going to be the moment, and there is going to be a rejection, and there is going to be an alternative. But what there wasn't back in 2005 was a broad-based social movement that had a vision for what the next economy should look like. And that vision is best encapsulated in the phrase, the Green New Deal, which is not one policy. It's a host of policies. It's a vision for fighting climate change and racism and every kind of inequality, and getting off fossil fuels within a decade. And so that we didn't have that in 2005. And so in the absence of having our own ideas lying around, to use Milton Friedman's phrase, they just went in there and they went further. They privatized the school system. They demolished public housing. That's why I say, never say never. There's always more public sector to destroy. There's always more that can be privatized. There's always more ways to take a crisis that was created by elites and hand it over to people who can't take it anymore. We saw it in Europe after the financial crisis. They are panicked because finally the stranglehold that the neoliberal project has had over the progressive imagination for 40 years is loosened enough that we aren't just saying, no, this is terrible, stop it. We actually have our alternatives, and they are ready to go.
And do you think part of what increases their panic as well is the fact that those alternatives are a part of, I guess, you could capitalize on that. There is profit to be had on the other end in the alternative, as opposed to what we saw in Katrina or in the financial collapse, where that was just more regulation on existing markets, as opposed to tearing down an economy and or not just tearing down an economy, but bringing new profit sectors to an anemic American economy. That's part of also why I think, maybe Democrats are more willing to accept some of these ideas too, more traditional Democrats who would have been more amenable to a neoliberal project, say 10 years ago. Does that make sense?
I think, well, look, there's money to be made in renewables, which is why there's wind. Yeah. That's why there's wind power in Texas, right? I mean, a not insignificant amount of wind power. It's not the reason the power went out, but it's around 20% of the grid. So I don't think it's so much about whether there are markets in this or whether there are markets, but I think you're absolutely right, Emma, that I think that there's support for support for these policies, or some parts of these policies, in the Democratic Party establishment. Because absolutely, renewable energy is a growth sector. You can create a lot of jobs. But I think what Texas shows is that it isn't just about having a renewable energy market. It has to be regulated. I personally think it needs to be in public hands. I think we need energy democracy. I mean, and public doesn't mean like one big state power sector. In Germany, they have hundreds of cities and towns that have remunicipalized their power grids in order to get to 100% renewable energy, because private players wanted to do it, but they wanted to do it more slowly. And we have to do it so fast that it might not be profitable in the short term. And we have to be honest about that. I think that there's a lot of sort of happy talk about how, this is all going to be great and growth and jobs and so on. And there are going to be jobs, and it is possible to do, but there are also going to be some players who lose a lot of money in this process. And so, coming back to your point, in Texas, it's a petro state. And so there's not going to be the same kind. Renewable energy is a sector where you can create a lot of money, but it lends itself to decentralization in a way that fossil fuels don't. right? And this is, I think, a really key point. Fossil fuels, by their very nature, they're buried in the ground, okay, in specific places. So you have to spend a lot of money to dig it up, and then you need to spend a lot of money to transport it and process it. And because of those very, very costly, just necessary for running it, right, just sunk costs, that lends itself to monopolies or just a few big players. You're not going to have a mom and pop fossil fuel operation, right? Whereas renewable energy, if you're talking about wind and solar, it's everywhere. So it's decentralized by its very nature. And so what that means is that, yes, people can make money, but you're going to have many players making less money. And so a political structure that, like Texas and like the Republican Party generally, that is built kind of around an oligarchic power, right? You have a few big players, and those big players fund up a whole political operation. They are very invested in keeping that level of centralization and are very threatened by a model which says, hey, you can put solar panels on your rooftop and become a competitor to your local utility. So your customer becomes your competitor. That's no fun. That gives you way less power, right? Political power and economic power. And gives you more actual power.
I would add to that. I just, spoke with Andreas Malm. I don't know if you're familiar with him. A Swede who's just written a book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. I should say it's not a specific manual, but he had written a book.
Fossil Capital,
which makes that very point that on some level you have the investor class. They invest in this huge apparatus to get the oil out of the ground. They are looking at 10x, 100x more in terms of returns on that fossil fuel. On some level, there's an analogy between the investment that in returns that people expect from, let's say, a cable news program versus this one. A bunch of these combined might be able to generate the same amount of revenue, but in terms of an investor class, the returns are just simply not going to be there.
Right.
And so that's why they're going to fight this. And ultimately, we can't rely on the profit motive or incentive to this isn't one of those sort of like clash of titans where you have.
And it's often why you'll have there's a big lobby that's pushing really hard for nuclear, right? And it spends a lot of time lying about renewables and claiming that they're not efficient, that it's not possible to have the kind of backup power, which of course we can have with battery power. And I've tried to understand, like, why is it? Why are they so invested in pushing nuclear, which obviously has way more risks than renewables? And we know what those are. And I think it's because it's more of a one-to-one substitution, right? Nuclear has the same sort of ownership structure as fossil fuels. Ton of money to get it out and process it. And it lends itself, once again, to a few big players that are going to make a hell of a lot of money. And it doesn't challenge that sort of concentrated either economic power or political power in the same way that renewables do.
We should add that the production, when you talk about nuclear, you're also talking about sort of long-term financing. The production of energy with renewables, once you've done the initial investment on the infrastructure, it's hard to sort of to juice the profits there because you've done all the heavy lifting, at that point in terms of the generation of the energy. Once you've built the panels or the windmills, that's just happening at that point. All right.
Right. You don't have to keep rebuying your input.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that, as Andreas Malm's research shows, that made fossil fuels a hard sell originally. Among industrialists in Europe who were saying, well, why would I continuously rebuy coal when I'm currently getting my power from water? They had these huge water wheels that were actually more powerful than coal power at the time. And Malm makes the argument that the appeal of fossil fuels was the power that it gave to factory owners to move their factories wherever they wanted, and find the cheapest, most controllable labor, that it's always really been about power and not about electricity kind of power, political power. Yeah.
Well, so let me ask you this. So the neoliberal project had the ability to have these ideas on the shelves, right? Like, and through Cato, Heritage, through, on and on. They built an infrastructure that was able to sustain itself without responding to events in any given moment, right? Like we have, and like you say, in 2005, there was no infrastructure on the nominal left to respond to these crises with ideas. How do we sustain that?
It was very reactive. Yeah. Like you had local groups trying to fight a demolition, but
I mean, how do we sustain a basically like, to use an analogy with what we saw in Texas, there was no regulation to have extra capacity in the system, right? It was relied upon these private actors. You guys, you're making so much money that you're going to reinvest to have extra capacity. Well, why would we? When that would be, just in reserves, why would we do that? And they didn't. Regulation that we have in other places in the country.
They also just don't care, Sam.
They don't care. They don't care because there's no incentive.
Ted Cruz flying off to Cancun. It's like, this is like a metaphor for how these guys actually think, which is that they're going to be fine.
Exactly.
And when the shit hits the fan, they are getting on a plane and leaving. Their wealth and power will protect them. This is really important to understand about Republicans and so-called climate deniers. They know climate change is real. They think they're going to be fine. That is why they feel free to play games.
And these energy companies know that they can get, Abbott to jump on TV and say it's the Green New Deal so that they're not going to, have to go back into some type of regulatory regime. They'll ride it out in
They'll
6
get bailed
months.
Out.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but how do we develop a sustainable movement without the resources that the right has to, because I'm just thinking about back when we had our first conversation, there was a blogosphere and there was a lot of people, it was a new technology. A lot of people were going on, they were doing this as amateurs, but over time, when George Bush went away and there wasn't the urgency and the immediacy in that moment, there was nothing to sustain their voices, and all of that just sort of evaporated. Some went into, sort of more institutional work, but it just dissipated. How do we prevent any type of dissipation when when it's that much harder to maintain? We have people who are very, but it's hard to maintain this unless you have resources.
Right, and you have to have that kind of discipline. To have your plan and push your plan when there are openings. And so we are in better shape than we were in 2005 or 2008 when the financial crisis happened and you had, Occupy Wall Street eventually, but you didn't have a set of clear demands about, okay, well, what do we want instead of this failed system? So we are in a better place than we were. We have the squad. We have key policy planks that we're pushing for. We've had 2 Bernie Sanders presidential campaigns that have put these ideas solidly on the map, whether it is canceling student debt, whether it's free college, whether it's Medicare for all, whether it's ending mass incarceration, defunding the police, moving that money over to a Green New Deal. We have made a lot of progress in terms of those affirmative demands and having an affirmative vision. Like I said in the piece, after Katrina, there was no squad, there was no sunrise movement. The climate justice movement was nascent at that point. So we've done a lot of work, and we need to give ourselves credit that there has been progress. DSA, was a few thousand people. It was not the sort of political force that it is now. Justice Democrats didn't exist. There is infrastructure on the left that has been taking ideas seriously, investing in ideas, investing in vision, not just issues, right? This is the problem that we had a right that was deeply funded in its worldview. Milton Friedman represented a worldview, a vision for what the world should look like. a terrible vision, but a vision, a dangerous vision, but a vision. And then you had liberal foundations that were funding narrow issues. These people will work on environment. These people will work fighting racism. These people will work for gender equality. But there was not a vision for what the world should actually look like, because frankly, that was threatening to these liberal foundations, a lot of them, who weren't interested in that kind of deep change. They wanted kind of Band-Aids. So there has been a shift. That is why they're going after the Green New Deal. It represents a thawing of that frozen imagination, and that was really successful in the Reagan-Thatcher project of saying you are not allowed to talk about alternatives. There is no alternative. You can critique what we're doing and say you don't like it, but that is different from saying we actually have a different plan for what the economy should look like. And I think we should, I think they're telling on themselves by going after the Green New Deal as hard as they are. I think that's a hint that this is really where we need to do more work. We need to invest more in that sort of idea infrastructure. We need movements cooperating more on that holistic vision. And we just need to stay the course, frankly, because I think we're in better shape than we've been in a long time. I know that seems like a weird thing to say at such a dire moment in Texas, but the fact that they are going after the Green New Deal means they're terrified that the left is the ones that have alternatives that can speak to where people are at. I mean, Abbott is a monster. He evicted thousands of people from their tents in places like Austin just to get them out of the way, a year ago. And then the pandemic hits, and now this, these weather shocks of the kind that we're going to see more and more of in a warming world, in a destabilized climate, they've got nothing to offer to people. And people need real solutions. They are in pain. And that is the kind of conditions that won the original New Deal. And that is what's scaring them.
What is the next step mechanically? I mean, it's one thing to say, like, keep going on in this way, but or maybe let me rephrase that. Is there a specific, yes, but is there
go hard on Biden?
I mean, I guess, that is, I think, that's across the board. I think that that is, but is there a specific next step, or is it like all of the above and see which works?
I think that we need to be investing in that intellectual architecture. We need to be taking it seriously. We need ways of funding it that aren't dependent on liberal foundations that are never actually going to believe in it. I think we need to do, I think we are seeing the power of the squad, and we need to keep enlarging the squad. And so, looking forward to the next midterms, we need to be thinking about that. I think we've made some progress, and I think that there never should have been a honeymoon with Biden. I think he was better than we expected out of the gate, but now what we're seeing is that Biden is Biden.
Right.
And he is not our friend, frankly. I mean, if you want a Green New Deal, Biden's not your friend. He's co-opted a lot of the discourse, but when it comes to doing the really hard things that involve standing up to donors, we cannot rely on him. And so this moment where it is so clear to people that small sort of tinkering solutions are not the fit for our era of big overlapping and intersecting crises, that is the moment where we need to be pushing as hard as we possibly can, because no, he's not FDR. FDR wasn't FDR before he was FDR, but Biden isn't FDR.
Well, he's not LBJ either, which is that was, I thought, the loftiest hope. He's not that either.
Yeah, so we're in better shape, but we're not where we should be. We're not where we could be, and that's why there's a lot of sad Bernie friends thinking about Nevada right? This time last year, my last happy day 1 year ago when we won Nevada.
Oh yeah, I was in Vegas. I won money there. That's a rarity too. That doesn't happen often.
Well, I mean, I think that's that's a good place to end. I mean, I think,
Just
one of the
sad
other
Bernie emojis.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's actually one other thing that occurs to me too, that I think is interesting about the Green New Deal phenomenon, is that it feels like, and this is early in this new era, but it feels like that bankruptcy that you're talking about in terms of a response has also had a structural implication for the turf that Republicans are fighting on. Like, there is no, you cannot, even in the context of this $1.9 trillion, the COVID relief bill that the House is, I think, scheduled to pass this week. They're in the middle of committee markup, and then it's going to go to the Senate, and we're going to get that. What's in it isn't necessarily all the things that we want, but the voices of austerity, the voices that I would have anticipated a year ago, I didn't know idea that this was going to happen. I would have said there would have been the Republicans are going to come out and they're going to talk about like the deficit and the debt and this and that. And they don't even seem to be engaging in that. They're immediately sort of moving into a different silo, almost like a different playing field where it's like, we can't even pretend anymore about the whole deficit debt thing or the austerity thing. The issue is like, I think they're sort of, flopping around for what it is, but it's going to be something more cultural, and they're not even engaging. There's no Paul Ryan to pretend that like, oh, I'm thoughtful about this. They don't even seem to be engaging in that. And I think, A, is that your sense as well? And B, if it is, that is even more of an opportunity for those of us to put some real ideas into the discourse.
It is. I agree entirely that there is a sort of an eerie silence on the deficit front. It doesn't mean it won't come back. But I think the pandemic is a pretty tough time to be playing austerity politics. It can always get worse though. And however it comes back, you say cultural. Look, I think, even when it comes just to climate, one of the, we often talk about how do we convince climate change deniers, right? One of the scarier prospects is what happens when people on the far right stop denying the reality of climate change. And then they just have this sort of unmasked eco-fascism, which far right parties in Europe have fully embraced, like Marine Le Pen in France. She's not a climate denier. She fully says climate change is happening, and that is why we have to lock down the borders, protect our own. And this was very kind of alive in the bloodstream in Texas. When you think about the El Paso massacre in the Walmart a little more than a year ago. This was a shooter who was inspired by the New Zealand mass shooting at the two mosques. That was a self-described eco-fascist. The guy who, I don't use their names, but in El Paso, he went to Walmart, he said, because he realized that if brown people start consuming the way Americans do, then the planet is destroyed. So he went to a Walmart that is frequented by Mexican Americans and by Mexicans coming across the border to basically say, you're not allowed to shop like us, right? So when we say it's going to come back and it's cultural, it's monstrous. The cultural form of this is really monstrous, not to say that it isn't monstrous now. But yeah, things can always get worse, which is all the more reason why we need to be very clear about how we respond to climate change, massive inequality, systemic racism, all at the same time. And that's called the Green New Deal.
Naomi Klein, your new book, I think, as you're aware, How to Change Everything, The Young Human Guides to Protecting the Planet and Each Other, is going to be released tomorrow. And tonight at 6 p.m., you can check out Naomi at a virtual book launching at the Brooklyn Public Library. We will put a link to that. It's BicklinLibrary.org. I don't know why they just couldn't do the whole Brooklyn, but we will put a link to that at majority.fm and in the podcast and YouTube description. Thank you so much, Naomi. Really appreciate it. Always great to talk to you.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks, Emma. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
All right, folks, quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, and just wrapping up things here. As she was saying at the end there, Emma, about this notion of eco-fascism, I am reminded of the mayor. I can't remember which town it was in Texas, saying, putting out on, I think it was on Facebook or something, like, you got to take care of yourselves. Like, stop relying on the government to do this. Like this sort of sense of total individualism in the face of an issue like, and I remember seeing somebody, I think it was on Twitter, putting up a picture of their wood stove and their wood next to it in their house. That's all well and good, unless you live in an apartment building or unless you don't have a wood stove.
Yeah, and 60% of heating is electrical in Texas. So, I mean, yeah, I guess you can just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and create your own electrical lines. I mean, that's what the response is going to be from conservatives. As these climate-related catastrophes ramp up, it's going to be more personal responsibility rhetoric as opposed to, addressing or reckoning with the fact that they created the conditions that wrecked so much infrastructure because of their own greed and lack of foresight.
And let's be clear where that sort of, pull yourself up by the bootstraps rhetoric heads towards, right? Like, we're going to protect our own. I'm going to protect my family and you protect yours. Maybe you do it by going to Cancun or not, but I'm going to protect my family. And that sort of individualism is the sort of building block of that type of eco-fascism, right? That notion of we've got to edify our borders and we're going to prepare so that we survive the climate upheaval as opposed to necessarily other people like that. I mean, that is...
Well, they walk hand in hand, the us versus them and the bootstraps.
Exactly. And so people should be aware of that rhetoric as it comes up. It's not just a question of, you got to be kidding me, dude. Like, you're saying the solution to the grid failure is for everybody to go back and pretend like it's 1835. No, the solution of the grid failure is to have a central government that is responsible for the grid, so that job number one is not profits. Job number one is getting people electricity. And that is we'll see. I think.
And it needs to be reckoned with in other states that have, basically corporation types that monopolize electrical grids and power systems. It's not just a Texas problem, although it's acute there.
Indeed. All right. We'll have more to talk about on this and more on tomorrow's program. Till then, we will say adieu, right? Is that what I want to say?
Yeah, good job.
Bye, y'all. How's that?
Yeah, you really pull off the southern drawl well.
I was supposed to be more like Texas.
Right?
Yep. And for those of you sticking around, we will be heading into the fun half in just a moment. First, let me just remind you, Hunt a Killer. It's the murder mystery subscription box. That's the most exciting date night you can have at home. Hunt a Killer brings people together by challenging them to decode ciphers, examine clues, you solve puzzles. It's like an escape room delivered right to your door. And nobody's going to an escape room now, I can tell you that. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority. Use the promo code majority for 20% off your first box. Again, make sure you use code majority for 20% off. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. Don't forget justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. They got a bunch of new flavors of coffee. Blends. What do you call that? Yeah, blends, not flavors. Blends and roasts. Check it out. justcoffee.coop. Also, don't forget AM Quickie every morning. Available, I don't know, basically before you wake up, unless you got kids, in which case it probably comes out shortly after you wake up. But you can check that out, amquickie.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Jamie.
Hello.
I haven't seen you since your vacation. Oh, yes, I have. Or I haven't seen you since mine. What's happening on the Antifada?
Well, this week on the Antifada, we speak with Matt and Emogue from the local to us, Radical Community Center Woodbine Space about the new Adam Curtis series that came out on the BBC. We had a lot of different opinions on it. Some of us took a more radical message from it. Some of us thought it was maybe even a little anti-communist, a little idealist, shall we say. So we had like a spirited back and forth about that. And that will be coming out on Wednesday and Friday because there was so much of it that we got a bonus to. Patreon.com/The Antifada. Also, our episode from last week with Left Flank Vets is still good. If you haven't listened to it yet, you want to learn about openings for socialist organizing in the military. Check that out. And also watch us on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/The Antifada. We're streaming really 4 nights a week now, if you count the night that Sean plays video games, talks about stuff. We had a really fun ladies' night last Thursday. That's a new show that I'm doing all by myself on Thursdays. Oh my God. And the VOD is still up if anyone wants to watch, Antifada After Dark, shall we say. And that's going to be happening every week. Twitch.tv/The Antifada, 7 p.m. Eastern.
I watched a couple of those Adam Curtis. It's 6-part series, right? Mm-hmm. And I watched a couple. I like it. I mean, I find the different sort of like historical stories fascinating. There's a little bit of like, if you start with a theme, I think you can find it anywhere. If you can find it in history. You can find any theme you want in history. I find it fascinating, and I think they're well done. But I'm not sure I necessarily buy the premise yet. But we'll see.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed it as well. Apparently, he really brings it together at the end. I fell asleep before the very end part because his voice is very soothing to me. So I'm gonna need to go back and watch it. But I enjoy his movies. I think they're cool.
I do too.
I'm just not sure if they necessarily agree with my politics. Although, according to Sean, his sort of weird idealist analysis of history and psychosocial crises can exist alongside a Marxist analysis. So there you go.
There you go. I'm envious that you're able to fall asleep with noise in the background. I'm a terrible sleeper. Double earplugs, white noise machine, and fan necessary for me.
Wow. That's a lot of white noise.
Mm-hmm.
A
fan
soft...
and a noise machine?
Well, it depends. I have somebody who my new neighbor is clearly a musician.
Oh boy. Oh boy. No, like a soft voiced British man. I don't know what it is. It's like ambient to me. Like I still don't know anything about Gothic architecture because I had a professor like that in college. And as soon as he turned on the lights and started putting slides up, talking about Gothic architecture, it was like, can't stay awake.
Yeah, that does sound specifically designed to put people to sleep.
Folks, you can check out what's going on in the Matt Leckian universe, Left Reckoning. Find it on YouTube and on wherever your podcasts are served. I imagine he's doing some work this week. He's technically on vacation, but you know how Matt is. There's probably a lot of streaming video going on with video games. All right, I'm going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half, 646-257-3920. See you there.
In for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck them. Almost has what?
Almost
says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on!
Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Welcome to the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. My favorite IM over that brief break. Does Sam focus group his mispronunciations ahead of showtime to find the most hilarious ones?
You have all the time in the world for that, right?
I've been developing essentially a cache or cachet
Oh,
of mispronunciations for decades. And I used them on the show.
You should do like a book of them, kind of
malapropisms.
Right. Or samapropisms.
Yeah. Sam, like mispronunciations, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know.
But you have to make it like, yeah, right. But
that guy died.
They're yours.
What was it? Norm Cosby? Was it who it was? Norm Crosby? One of those guys did the malapropisms.
It just hurts my ears so much every time.
Which one?
Like all of them.
All of his, all of Sam's.
Yeah.
Oh my
you
gosh.
you missed that you called it.
You got to get a filter.
You called it the New Green Deal in the headlines during the.
I did.
Mm-hmm. I laughed, and I don't think you noticed.
I said the New Green Deal. Mm-hmm. Look, I'm a little rusty.
It's all right.
But it is, a new Green Deal. It's new, green. Oh, the Green New Deal. All right. Yeah, no, I got it.
It turns out the order that you put descriptors, that you put adjectives in before a noun that it's modifying is according to some rules that you just know if you grow up speaking English, although apparently not if you're you, Sam. And then you have to learn these rules when you're learning English. I had no idea.
You got to learn them every time over and over again. For me, when I think of the Green Deal, it's the newness of the green. That is what I feel gets lost in
the dewy, fresh Green Deal.
It's just like, this isn't like the old green. It's a new green.
So it's not like a Christmas tree green. It's more of a fresher, punctuated.
There's no word for it because it's new. No one's named it yet. This is interesting. HuffPost reports over the weekend, a guy named Reggie Wood had a press conference with Malcolm X's daughters and the civil rights attorneys and a couple of three civil rights attorneys. Reggie Wood's cousin, Ray Wood, was an undercover New York City police officer. Ray Wood got stomach cancer in 2011. And when he did, he revealed to his family that the NYPD and FBI worked with him to make sure that the two men who were in charge of Malcolm X's security detail were arrested days before Malcolm X gave a speech at the Audubon Ballroom in New York City. That is where Malcolm X was shot and killed. And he wrote a letter that he asked Reggie Wood not to release until he died. He died in November of 2020. He wrote in that letter, for 10 years, I've carried this confession secretly in fear of what would happen to my... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Reggie Wood said at the thing that he has carried the secret for 10 years. Ray Wood obviously carried that secret for 55 years or so.
Yeah.
And apparently, according to his letter, in 1965, Wood's New York City Police Department supervisors instructed him to devise a plot to bomb the Statue of Liberty and to get two of these guys from Malcolm X's security detail to buy into it. Meanwhile, these guys, Khalil Syed and Walter Bowie, they were, I may be mispronouncing their names, they were arrested because of their participation in that plot. He wrote in his letter, it was my assignment to draw the two men into a felonious federal crime so that they could be arrested by the FBI and kept away. So it had to be a federal crime. Arrested by the FBI and kept away from managing Malcolm X's Audubon Ballroom door security. And when these two guys, Said and Bao, were arrested in connection with the plot, this is just 5 days before the speech, Bao had testified at the time that it was Wood who devised the plot. And of course, nobody believed him. But this letter corroborates Bao's claim. Bao, I believe, died in 2009. Apparently, his cousin, or I should say, Wood, withheld his role in Malcolm X's assassination. This is according to his cousin, because he, quote, worried about what the NYPD and the FBI would do to him and his family if he told the dark secrets that he helped destroy black leaders and black power. This Wood himself was also black. And he said in his confession that the New York Police Department also tried to frame a group of the Black Panthers known as the Panther 21. They were ultimately acquitted.
Well, the FBI was also, I mean, they were all over Martin Luther King at the time of his death, all over him. Every single waking move or anything MLK did, they were surveilling him. They had eyes on him. No eyes on him at the time of his assassination. It's curious.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see if there is, if people start to file FOIAs on this.
Well, we're going to get a lot of these things declassified as the FBI's ability to keep them under wraps expires in a few years, I believe. Specifically related to Martin Luther King, the recordings of his alleged, very well documented, we should say, extramarital affairs, but also other information surrounding the FBI's, like, you know, they reportedly tried to bribe Malcolm X and all of their involvement trying to destroy the Black Panthers. We're going to see so much more of this. And it shouldn't shock anybody. I mean, but at the same time, it seems totally out of character for J. Edgar Hoover to do something like this, right?
Well, right? I mean, it shouldn't shock people, but most people don't have this sense of this type of history at all, I think. The vast majority of people.
Well, most white people. Right. I mean, I think that like the issue too is just that there's so much propaganda about the FBI and cop shows and the FBI is this beacon of, like, what was the movie Mississippi Burning? You know, it was really the FBI that helped liberate Black people in the South. Like, that was basically the latent premise there. There's so much embedded propaganda in our country about the FBI, which, like, it's still a nefarious organization, but especially then, it ran rampant over civil rights and just had wide breadth and completely tried to destroy the civil rights movement at every turn. And that's how they should be viewed historically.
Yeah. And it's not just history. Like you said, like, if you think they're not still doing this shit, Black Lives Matter leaders keep turning up dead under suspicious circumstances. Wonder what's going on there. Like, this is an ongoing struggle, and Black liberation poses a threat to the American system, which is built on exploitation and white supremacy. So as long as people are struggling against it, the state is going to be, you know, doing what it can to put a lid on it.
I mean, I think that's why it's so important that these type of stories get amplified, because, you know, there was an era in the 70s where this was, there was an era in the 70s that was, you know, I think people were far more sensitive to the Church Commission and people understanding, you know, so what was happening with the COINTELPRO. But that is now, you know, 50, 45, 40 years ago. And I think there, like you say, there's been a lot of work done to sort of sugarcoat the responsibility of these agencies in this type of stuff. And, you know,
or portray them as working alongside the civil rights leaders when it was the exact opposite. And it is the opposite today, as Jamie points out. Black Lives Matter and federal law enforcement and law enforcement in general, because they are just law enforcement. They're just on a federal stage. There's an acrimonious relationship between the two, and it should not be viewed and whitewashed in history, because, like, then that you know what that does? That downplays the immense obstacles that Black liberation leaders and civil rights activists had to go up against. They had to go up against the entire federal law enforcement apparatus, and it was not easy.
It's still not.
Yeah, it's still not. But I mean, now at least we have like people on the internet who talk more freely about this kind of stuff. Back then, it was under it was a gaslighting operation where where they were being surveilled, they were being harassed, they were being murdered, and everyone was told that it wasn't happening, and they were told it wasn't happening, and they just had to trust, have the courage of their convictions, to believe that what they were seeing was real.
Yeah. Well, once again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is the purpose that law enforcement serves in our society. And this is why we need to take away their power, take away their toys, take away their funding, and shrink them down till you can drown it in a bathtub. Because this is the purpose that it serves.
Certainly one of them. All right, let's take a look at this. This is interesting. I'm really interested to see how this is going to play out. One of the things that has come out of Texas has been there are people, because it's a completely deregulated sector in the state of Texas. You have the opportunity to buy your electricity wholesale, even if you are just a regular customer. And however, the prices are going to be cheaper. However, these prices are not fixed. They're variable. So in the event that, let's say, there's a catastrophic failure of the electric grid to provide electricity, they're going to jack up the prices. And so you have people in Texas who are now looking at thousands of dollars of electric bills run up in just literally over the past couple of days. Here is a clip. This is from Deandra Upshaw showed on CNN. She's a Dallas resident. She received
it's a guy.
Oh, DeAndre. Received a $6,700 energy bill.
As I understand it, they warned that your bill was going to skyrocket, but did you have any idea that that meant $6,700?
No idea. In Texas, usually when we have a bad bill, which we were bracing for, our normal month's usage is about $80 for February. We were anticipating $300 or $400, but never in any stretch of the imagination did I think $6,700 would be what they charged me.
You're seeing these type of stories all over the place, right? Where people are getting thousands of dollars of phone bills. Electric bills. And what's going to be fascinating is to watch and see if folks like Ted Cruz, particularly Ted Cruz, but Cornyn, any of the Republican lawmakers, really anybody, calls for debt forgiveness here.
Because... Yeah, but Sam, what about all the other people that paid their electric bills in times of crisis, right? Wouldn't that delegitimize the money that they paid?
First of all, it would provide a moral hazard, right? The idea that if your bill is too large, you would get it relieved in some fashion. It also is like personal responsibility. You were willing to accept the flex pricing when it was cheaper for you, but you're not willing when it's more expensive. I mean, just contemplate somebody making those type of arguments and how absurd it would sound to your ears if you're one of those people who makes those arguments about college debt relief. I mean, it is exactly parallel. And nobody would be going, find me the person, I'm sure there's some, who are going like, well, you're just out of luck. $16,000, $7,000, $10,000. You spun the wheel and that's what you got.
Yeah, but probably all the people that are in debt or have all these high electric bills that can't pay them, they're probably all really rich people that went to Ivy League colleges.
Well, it's like, I mean, it doesn't even matter what their wealth is, but I get your point. But Yeah, but the point is
a
like
joke.
you entered into the contract. Yeah, you entered into the contract.
Can I ask why these bills are so high? Like, what is the justification on the part of the electric companies?
Demand, supply are mismatched. So you own a bakery, you sell your cupcakes for $2, and at 4:30 you got one cupcake left, but 50 people come in and they hit the counter right at the same time.
I see. Right. So they get to profit on the front end by having crappy infrastructure, and on the back end as well when, oh no, electricity is scarce, we have to charge more.
This is the best thing in the world as far as they're concerned. This is like hitting
well, there's no competition. There's no competition, right? Like if the Republicans want there to be competition in a free market, there should be other electric power companies that are able to provide for people, but like that's not the reality.
You would think. I just hope that there's some kind of concerted effort to resist this, because I feel like Americans are still pretty cucked on some levels, and they might just end up doing what the electric company is offering them, which is, oh yeah, you can pay this off over the course of 10 years.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it really is unbelievable. I mean, this is, it's unbelievable. And I would even say that, like, if you have this perspective on student debt, understand that it's the federal government that is making money off of people. It is less justifiable to not relieve student debt than it would be to relieve the debt of these electric customers. And to be clear, I think all of it should be relieved. I don't think that they, but hopefully Texas voters at least will understand the implications of, like, oh, I guess this sometimes you get bit on the ass for this stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, ERCOT, like, they're responsible for these systems being faulty. They didn't weatherproof anything.
But ERCOT is they're not in charge of doing this.
Well, it's because it's the market's so deregulated. I mean, don't they oversee it?
Yeah, that's not. No, they don't. It's not their job to regulate the market. Their job is just to basically shuttle where electricity is coming in. So they're just basically they're just traffic cops, but they don't make the laws that say you need to, like, stop at the red light or this and that. They're just traffic cops.
Right. Well. Yeah.
This is deregulated. The only thing that they have the ability over is to say, like, we're hitting critical overload. And so we've got to do the rolling blackouts, because if we don't, the whole system shuts down and we can't start it up again for a month. Like, I don't understand exactly how that works. Apparently you go from a dead, if the grid is mismatched and you blow essentially the circuit, this is rudimentary understanding of it. You blow the circuit, you've got to, like, you've fried your panel and you've got to go fix that. And it's going to take a month.
But then who's responsible for quality control? Like, in terms of weatherproofing their systems?
That's it. There's no regulation.
Okay.
They expect the private suppliers of these energy suppliers to do it, because they're like, well, you've got all these profits. It's just like basically saying to the banks in the wake of the financial crisis, we're going to bail you out. And so we are hoping that you guys will offer, pay it forward to your customers. And the bankers just said, like, oh, you mean we don't have to? Okay, we won't after we get the money. And that's exactly what happened with these energy companies. They're not required to put heating elements on their windmills. They're not required to put heating elements on their on how they're drilling for natural gas or their pipes. They're not required in any of these instances to weatherize for these type of extreme weather events. And their attitude is like, it's once in a 50-year thing, once in a 100-year thing. Why should we do it?
Yeah.
And meanwhile,
they profit from it.
Right. They are required by the directives of capitalism and their shareholders to maximize profits at all costs. So why would they do any of that stuff? I mean, this is just one more example of how these many, many crises in which we find ourselves are going to be immensely profitable for the corporations. They're profiting. They're probably going to profit off of interest fees and late fees too when people can't pay their bills. And corporations profit off of poverty all the time.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And they are scrambling. The Republicans are scrambling to come up with an excuse as to why this happened. I mean,
they're literally tilting at windmills.
Literally. But
I
here
mean,
is
and the damage was done, by the way. Like, all of these articles now have wind turbines in the headline. I mean, in the photo.
It's absurd.
It's just like the right-wing media got out in front of it, and so there we go. There it goes.
It is amazing how quickly they made this about wind turbines. Here this morning, Jim Scuto, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, on CNN, has on Congressman Michael McCall from, here is McCall. He's from Texas, 10th District.
Republican Congressman Michael McCall of Texas. He's on the Homeland Security Committee and the ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for taking the time this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jim.
Lots to discuss this morning. I do want to ask you first about Texas. Your former Texas fellow Republican Congressman Will Hurd said on Sunday that this was a preventable catastrophe and that lack of leadership and lack of long-term planning was a factor. I just wonder, from your seat, did the state's leadership fail the people of Texas?
I believe the state and federal, to some extent. I was on State of the Union yesterday talking about a 2011 federal report talking about this very issue. They had a very hard winter storm back then. They talked about how we could winterize our energy operations back then. It's not that Texas doesn't have energy. It does. We're known as the energy capital. The problem, we're not used to Arctic temperatures like that literally froze the state and the ability of the state to push out the energy to the homes. And that was the major problem. I think it's going to be addressed.
How do you blame the federal government because they did a report saying, hey, you guys, after 2011, there was a freeze. It wasn't like this. You guys got a problem. We're going to do a report. Here's the report. We don't have any authority to go in and require you to have these fixes because you have an independent electrical grid. You have determined as a state that you're not going to have any regulation. But here's a report that's going to tell you, hey, this could be a problem. It may be a problem next year, or maybe it could be as far out as 10 years from now, but you should fix it. How do you blame the federal government in that instance?
It's eerie because in 2011, right, they were hit by a similar storm. And I had Kate Aronoff on last week to talk about this. And she cited Rush Limbaugh and the Drudge Report from 2011, blaming, quote, the Obama administration's agenda to lay siege to the coal industry for what Texas was experiencing. So they're doing the same exact thing, days after Rush Limbaugh has died. It's just super eerie. They go back to the what?
Oh, no, you just mentioned that Rush Limbaugh died.
Oh, right. Am I breaking news to you?
No, that was just me going like, oh.
Just a little warm, fuzzy feeling that you get every time you remember.
Yeah, I'll make sure to mention it a few more times. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how cyclical Republican narratives are. They use it time and time again. So time to blame the federal government again. Let's just use Rush's old talking points from literally a decade ago.
Oh, well, they're honoring his memory.
It would also be a good opportunity. Let's say you were interviewing this Republican lawmaker to go like, wait a second, can you explain that? How is it the federal government's fault for not doing anything where it doesn't have the ability to do anything? And all it did was make you aware that there was a problem 10 years ago and none of the people in Texas did anything. I mean, that to me seems like a good question to ask in that moment. But that's why Get the big bucks on the CNN. That's why we're just on a streaming app. Not on
you
the.
You gonna go further?
No.
Okay.
That's it.
Yep.
Let's see what we got here. Great work. Married to Mothra. Great work on Bob's Burgers last night. Oh, exciting. I had no idea.
Is there a new one?
I don't follow it. So I don't know. I just do them.
Oh. Because I ran out of them.
No, I think I know that we're recording new ones.
Well, that's good.
Remotely. It's weird.
It's one thing that I like to watch when I need to relax.
Bob's
and
Burgers?
like, get sleepy. Yeah.
I had no idea. That's very exciting.
It's very charming. It's a charming show. I feel
is.
like I like it a lot more than you do, which makes me mad.
I don't dislike the show. I'm not an animated. I don't watch animation.
Charming is my code word for if I'm saying, oh, that actor is very charming when I'm watching TV.
Oh yeah. I know I'm not sexually attracted to the characters on Bob's Burgers, if that's what you're implying.
That's good. Because I have seen the characters. That would be odd. So we played earlier a clip of Ron Johnson. Just one of it's amazing. It's near universal. Anybody who's ever had any exposure to this guy in real life, it's like, this guy is one of the dumbest people who's probably a senator. And there is a big opportunity in Wisconsin, particularly following the past really 2 years in Wisconsin, but really this past year, where the Wisconsin Democratic Party has sort of awakened and they have been able to draw people out and get people to vote. And Ron Johnson is in jeopardy. So who will the Democrats end up nominating? Well, very often what you see with these Senate candidates is that Chuck Schumer and the National Senate Election Committee will choose the one who can do the most fundraising. And very often that person is somebody who has millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars at their own, of their own, and can finance.
Correction. Daddy can finance, Sam. Please.
They have access to that. Yes. Or daddy can finance. I mean,
he's a very ambitious boy.
Here is a Democratic Senate candidate. His name is Alex Lasry. He is the son of a private equity baron, apparently. And his dad is the owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, which is a basketball team. Watch this clip.
I was excited by the fact that, like, hey, we were, like, possibly going to buy a basketball team. And, like, to me, that was, like, and I know for my dad, that was always, like, a dream of his. I didn't know much about Milwaukee. I knew the Brewers. I knew the Packers were in Wisconsin. I had been to Wisconsin one other time. I went to Oshkosh to help volunteer for Hillary in the primary in 2008 with my sister. And that was it. My first time to Milwaukee was when we came to meet with Senator Cole about possibly purchasing the team. And, I came in with kind of trying to, with just keeping an open mind about the city. The only places I'd lived in prior were New York, Philly, and D.C. So, kind of bigger East Coast cities. Mm-hmm. And, when I came here, I think what most surprised me about Milwaukee is the fact that Milwaukee has all of the same things that any other city, especially any other big city, has.
Pause it. So the guy is getting off on or the right foot here, right? Talking about how he kept an open mind that Milwaukee, it's in the center of the country. Do they even have billionaires in that city?
I thought it was just going to be like a cow patty and like 10 farmers making cheese, but it turns out they have like apartment buildings and sidewalks and everything. It's crazy.
They even have a Trader
all
Joe's.
That is true. They have all those things and motor vehicles as well.
Wow.
Continue.
He has all of the same things that any other city, especially any other big city, has. And I think, when you think about like smaller Midwestern cities, you don't think of them as like, okay, like they should be able to go pound for pound with, with a state like Chicago. Everyone always like Chicago is like, the New York of the Midwest. And what I kind of learned was Milwaukee has everything. It's got a great local art scene. It's got a great local food scene. 2 major sports teams that are, killing everyone else. The Packers, if you want to, include them, then you've got 3. Great bar scene, great universities. It just kind of had everything that you would want.
Party.
And when people said like, "Oh, it gets so cold," I mean, it gets cold everywhere.
I love when he lists 2 major sports teams. Yeah, right. There's got the Brewers, and what was the other one? Like, what is your connection to Milwaukee?
Actually, doesn't it have 3? Well, I guess.
No, the Packers are in Green Bay.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. But I love that. I mean, he's very entitled, thinks he could just buy himself a Senate seat. And apparently there is a progressive in the race. It's just the tip of the iceberg here. But
oh man, I've never wanted to see someone get owned more in the past, few days at least.
Hopefully we can make this another Mondaire Jones situation, right? Mondaire Jones was running in a crowded primary in New York for Congress, and he was outspent by a ton by the son of another very, very wealthy Wall Street guy who didn't really stand for much, but he had unlimited resources at his disposal and he lost. And now Mondaire Jones is a congressman and, was the more progressive candidate in that race. So hopefully we can do the same here. But I'm like, it's so entitled to say, I never even visited this state until my dad bought the team. And now I'd like to buy a Senate seat. Is that okay? Because there are human beings here and there's like a culture.
There's great bars. There's great bars, man. I mean, come on.
He's got everything he wants.
There's a lot of beer here, too. Did you know that? There's a lot of beer here in Milwaukee.
But luckily he dressed up for that interview.
I was also going to say, are you serious, dude? You're running for Senate? You're going on in a half-on hoodie? At least just put on a wrinkled shirt like this.
I know. And he's being interviewed by a local paper there, though, Sam. It's not like a big-time one like the New York Times, a big city, or even the New York of the Midwest, the Chicago Sun-Times, something like that. Maybe he would have deigned to put on a collared shirt for that. I don't normally harp on that, but it fits into the overall.
There's a certain amount of just incredible privilege that
it sounds like he's doing a recruitment for some, I don't know, corporations outer offices at the Milwaukee outpost. He's like, come on, dude, it's not bad, man.
Yeah, it's a casual Friday presentation from a middle manager guy at a hedge fund about synergy. That's that's the vibe.
He's the 3rd guy they send out from the Milwaukee Chamber of Commerce to convince people to move their headquarters out. They're like, you're not ready for prime time yet. Why don't you go out and do this? This is a small firm. We're just trying to convince them to move to Milwaukee. Get on the Zoom, see how you do. And then the next day they call them into office and say, listen, will you do us a favor? Not wear the hoodie when you're trying to impress people. Okay. Trying to get them to come.
And apparently the progressive candidate running is named Thomas Nelson.
All right. Vote for Thomas Nelson. I'm sold. Purely via negativity on that guy. Couldn't possibly be worse. He's literally a Nick Kroll character. It's like rich dicks get into politics.
Honestly.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
It's Wayla.
I don't know if this guy's actually a progressive, but he is the other candidate. I had to do this on a whim. Sorry.
Well, I have a feeling there's going to be more people who enter into the race, and we will know more about it going forward. But
I don't know. Important. That guy seems hard to beat.
Well, just losing charisma.
I mean,
yeah, he seems to care.
Well, but the problem is this. I mean, is that, like you say, this guy has unlimited resources. And now that doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, I remember when one of the former Facebook guys, his husband tried to run up in the 20th district, what was, I think, the 20th district at that time. It's now the one that Delgado represents. Zephyr Teachout ran against Faso. But before that, and this guy tried to win, he hadn't lived in the district in any meaningful sense. And like a year or two out, he started some type of like business initiative grant that you could apply for. You know, he's a billionaire or multi-hundred millionaire. I don't know. And it was one of those things like, apply for a grant, get $50,000, $100,000 business grant, seed money, like venture capital money on very, very good terms. And it, it was just a way to sort of like, I'm going to build community relationships. Now, fortunately it failed, but I wonder in, a statewide type of situation where like, TV ads and getting on there, that kind of money is sometimes difficult to beat. So it's good that at least he's being exposed early on and defined early as being a joker.
Yes. And I will just reiterate, I think I was right about Tom Nelson. He was a delegate for Bernie Sanders, called undemocratic. This is from Wikipedia, but he seemed to be more in favor of labor unions. And he has spoken in favor of the Green New Deal in the past. So definitely better than that joker.
Speaking of running for office, there is an empty seat in Ohio. Nina Turner. Do we know when this the primary is?
I looked it up the other day, and I think it's in the summer. Let me check. Okay. I think I saw June, but wait, look, here it is in my past search history because I do my research on the show, and May 4th, 2020. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Per Ohio law, the primary would likely be held on either May 4th or August 3rd, both concurrent with a regularly scheduled primaries, with the general election on either August 3rd or November 2nd. So there's two possible dates for the primary.
One would think that they would have already settled on it if it's not, May is only I guess it's 4 months away, but here's Nina Turner. She's on the Humanist Report. And she's walking through the dynamics that are involved in what was called Force the Vote, and trying to explain that the perception that people have of inside power is maybe sometimes wrong.
It's okay to be disappointed, but the squad is ultimately the best that we have in terms of being able to push an agenda. And what that means is that you might not always agree with the methods. I need people to understand that when you are on the inside, it doesn't mean that you are selling out. I know they've gotten a lot of pressure, but they are the ones up there holding it down. They're pushing as hard as they can. And just because things are not going exactly the way, just because they're not using the exact tactics that some in the activist community want them to use, that doesn't mean that you throw them away. Because guess what? If you're throwing away members of the squad who are our best opportunity to get what we need, and also some members of that progressive caucus, then you're not going to have anybody there. So if the prerequisite, in summation, if the prerequisite for relationship means that I have to do, or the squad has to do everything you say, the way you say do it, then there's not much of a relationship at all. And that you're going to be disappointed. Hell, they're going to be disappointed with me. I said that to Tim Black when we interviewed. I'm saying it to you, Mike. I want them to know you're going to be disappointed at some point. But that does not mean that you give up totally on the people who are the best fighting chance that you have. And then there's something called strategy. So the grassroots strategy is different than the strategy once you are on the inside. You will know when somebody is sold out. And I assure you that the squad has not, underline, bold, underscore, sold out in any way. They need the grassroots. You can hold them accountable, but you don't throw them away. I mean, some of the pressures, even with Congresswoman Cori Bush, I just want to use her as the example. I mean, she just got there. Hell, overall, the squad members overall just got there, even the ones who've been there a little longer. And then you have people just throwing up their hands, throwing them away just because they're not using the tactics that you want them to use. You don't know what is going on.
Hey, I appreciate that.
I'm so mad that Nina Turner even had to comment on this because, you know, she says it's coming from some in the activist community. It did not come out of the activist community. It came out of a few media figures who made a lot of noise online and, you know, the people who follow them on Twitter.
That's exactly right. I mean, you know, I think it's generous for her to say activist. But
and it's generous for her to basically give them that they're acting in good faith. I mean, a lot of this is not good faith criticism. A lot of this is for attention and to, as they've said in those Slack comments, divide the progressive left in order to build up their third party project.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, yes, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think like, but her point is she's talking to the people who are following them on Twitter as opposed to, you know, those people. I think, you know, those people have their agenda or they have their perspective. But I would love to add to her comment there. But there is literally nothing I can add to that.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly the case. I mean, and the bottom line is you don't want any institutional power if you are on the left and you are saying that we are willing to boot the members of the squad, for the lack of a better term. I mean, you just don't.
Look, I have no problem with holding the squad accountable. And I think the kind of, sanctimony that some people feel towards them, where they're just like sacred cows you can't criticize, is nonsense. But not over something like this. Like, let's wait until they actually do something that sucks to rake them over the coals.
I think it's also like, I also think though, I think it's okay to criticize, but over this, to say that you are writing them off, that they are fraudulent, that they are good for nothing, that they are not on your side, that's the difference. Like, that
AOC is standing in the way of healthcare and right. UN healthcare.
It's just absurd. It's just absurd. But I mean, good for her because, you know, she's a
force and she would be such an amazing addition to the squad and to the progressive community and group of lawmakers in terms of her fight. But is she a sellout now because she didn't endorse the specific tactic? And again, I'm sorry, it's not a coincidence that a lot of these allegations about sellout and selling out and not capitulating to a specific guy's exact tactics, it's not a coincidence that they're more often than not directed at women and women of color. And that's the dynamic that I get. And I'm sure that those same people will be as vitriolically angry at Nina Turner as they were to Ocasio-Cortez and others, because that's a common thread that we experience,
I will say
that we see. Yeah.
I will say I am skeptical that she went on those shows before coming on this one. So I'll just leave it there. I just think that's a really ominous sign. That's a really ominous sign.
Are you preemptively pulling your support from that fraud?
Look, it's like, how do you not look at? How do you not come here? Look at this.
Did we invite her?
UNS report doesn't have a.
Did we invite her? Did we invite her?
No, I generally. I've been like trying to figure out, there's a bunch of candidates that I want to have on actually. Yeah. And for the most part, we don't do that on this show, but I'm trying to figure out like when's the best time. And I want to do it soon where we have like maybe like 3 candidates on to talk about,
My point, though, Sam, is that she's a sellout for not asking to come on this show.
That's exactly my point.
Right.
And that's why I was pointing back to this. Like this, how do you not? How do you not? Like when you got this, look, I mean, come on.
Maybe you need to jazz up the studio with some
Are you
snazzy
kidding?
Gen X style. Because I hear Nina likes that.
We're at peak of all that. We're already there. That's my point. I don't want to get pulled into this. That lunatic. Okay. Beep. The way Sam says chuka makes me chuckle. Anti-Aximus Prime. Sam's vitamin regime initiated a coup in his cupboard. Kane thread. Seems the establishment media news outlets, politicians are 100% on the shame schools open because the witty bitty poor babies are suffering bandwagon. Where was all the concern for those witty bitties pre-COVID? Will they be concerned after COVID? Are teachers no longer essential, now expendable? It is amazing to me how this narrative has been they've been so relentless with its narrative. When you look at the polling, the majority of parents don't even want to send their kids back to school. And it is one thing, and every time you read anything, I mean, go look at even the most sort of what you consider to be the most fair or even biased report. They all say in-school learning is safe if the proper protocols are followed. That if is so massive and so underfunded. And the bottom line is, I don't think there would be, I bet you 95% of the teachers would be going back if they could be assured that there was proper ventilation in these schools, there was going to be proper distancing, you had proper PPE, and then, of course, on top of that, vaccinations. In most cases, there's none of those things. In some cases, there's some of those things. I'm aware of private schools that are, going in there. They test the kids once or twice a week. They have legitimate HVAC systems. They have the money to do this. And we have not sent to schools any money. So it's easy to say hypothetically that teachers should be in there teaching. But unless you deliver the if, which every one of these reports is contingent upon, then the conversation is over. You can't open the windows when it's 17 degrees out and get across and expect to teach in that situation. I mean, it's just absurd. It's just absurd. And this is a big opportunity for people who have issues with teacher unions in particular and public school more generally to attack, to undercut the perception of the public of teachers unions. And the amazing thing is it's not working because parents have the same concern as teachers, and they know what is in these schools and what's not in these schools and what their capacity is. I'm sure there are school districts around the country where it's being done the exact right way. And certainly there are college campuses that have figured it out, but it's a very different thing when you're talking about little kids and trying to get distance and not having any funding. It's unbelievable to me. So.
And then you have people like Lori Lightfoot in Chicago taking this science, twisting it around and using it to justify forcing teachers back to school when, as you said, the teachers don't want it and the parents don't want it.
And the science is a function of the science is built upon doing certain things to diminish the amount of how contagious it is. And there is no evidence that they are capable of doing that in Chicago. I mean, to the extent that the teachers have bought in that they're actually going to deliver those things, they're going back to work. But it's just amazing to me. I mean, it's like that if is always like, it's like saying like, I don't know why Sam doesn't fly. If he had wings, he could fly. So fly.
Yeah, I promise the teachers don't like teaching remotely. Like, it's not the issue that they're just lazy and want to go to work in their pajamas. Like, everyone I know who's a teacher tells me that it sucks.
Of course. And you don't go into teaching because you're like, I'm hoping there's going to be like I'm not going to have to go into school today and deal with the kids. Like, those aren't the people who are in teaching. Nobody's going like, I'm going to make a buttload and become a teacher. People go to teach because they want to teach kids. It's just nuts. It really is nuts. Here's Don Jr. You remember him, Donald Trump's son.
Oh, boy.
Special little guy.
Still out and about. That grand jury hasn't looked at the taxes. We'll see where that leads. But here he is. Don Jr. saying that Joe Biden is in favor of the teachers union. That's why that school hasn't come back in. Joe Biden has been president for exactly 1 month. And the idea that what we have going on with schools and teachers in this pandemic is not a function of his dad's presidency is just complete delusion, but not surprised. Here he is, Donald Trump Jr.
Whatever happened to follow the science? Follow the science. That's what we're going to do. It seems the Biden administration only follows the science when it actually suits them. One of the things I want to talk about that I've been reading a lot about lately is sort of the stuff as it relates to the teachers union. You've seen what they've done over the last couple of months, the way they've basically held up progress, prevented schools from opening. The teachers union and those representing them have definitely failed our children in terms of education and everything else. I mean, the teachers union has certainly failed the science they're supposed to be teaching us because, again, it's all political.
This guy's such a poser. Okay, one, the guns in the background. Like, just put that up for a second. Okay. You know, that was definitely his decor. The guy grew up in a golden, ostentatious penthouse apartment on Fifth Avenue, right? It's just like no way that any part of his home looks like that except there in order for him to film his shaky cell phone videos. And he looks and sounds so drugged up. I just like, allegedly, I mean, the guy's on drugs, I think, allegedly. That's just my vibe whenever I see him.
Well, put up that image again. I want to see those. There's a lot of gun safety there. Those things look like they're crammed into the.
Oh my God!
What is that? Like what? Like, hey, can we put these pegs all over the wall? But I want to just put all the guns in just one panel.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
Maybe they're fake guns he uses for decoration, because that's the only way that would be safe. Like, I don't know that much about guns yet. I'm just learning about them, just getting into them a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that that's not how you're supposed to store them.
No, you're supposed to store them like Lauren Boebert, just rest them atop her books behind her in her Zoom call. Yeah, I also love, he did take a little bit of Daddy's aesthetic with him. Can you go back? He you have to bring the gold into the frame, and so has gold Don Jr. letters. That's his brand there, right on the top. It's kind of the Trump Tower lettering, don't you think? But he made it italic, so he has his own personality, not his own name, but yeah.
This is a perfect example of how this whole issue is just being weaponized, if you will, to attack the teachers' unions. I mean, Don Jr. doesn't give a rat's ass about education or any of the people who are served. And I don't remember his dad ever talking about we must provide for the schools the things they need to reopen. No, it is simply you teachers are disposable. You're going to go in there and teach, and we're just going to get this moving so that people can have daycare essentially for their kids at your expense. And supposedly they're going to go to work, but none of those parents are going to go back to work because their kids aren't, they're going to avoid it because they don't want to get COVID. It's unbelievable. It really is just stunning that, but there's this latent hostility, not even latent. There's this hostility towards teacher unions, and any opportunity that can be, I guess, put to work. There you have it. So,
well, not to mention, he's got it backwards when he says Biden is owned by teachers unions, right? Because it's a sad thing that's happened over the past few decades, but for the most part, organized labor doesn't have that much independent power from the Democratic Party anymore. So in a way, like, Biden owns them, if you're going to say who has more power, but you see them starting to stand up. And who are they standing up to? A lot of these cities where teachers are, mad about being forced back to work, they're governed by Democrats. So it's the fantasy world that he's living in.
Yeah, the fantasy world with a lot of guns. Can we just see it one more time? Because I'm pretty sure that all those guns are pointed inward. And like, it's almost like he has a halo around him, right? Like he has
or it's
4 or 5 guns pointed at him.
Or it's a cry for help.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think this is kind of an internal vision into his psychology here, right? He feels he has to have all the guns, man, but all the guns are pointed at him.
Wow, that's heavy.
He needs some more Coke.
Yeah, that'll fix him.
Yeah, with all those guns. That sounds like a great mix. But I also want to be clear. There is real suffering amongst children. There's just no doubt about it. But it's also the failure has happened. The failure has happened. We did not get the money to the schools when we needed to. And even now, when the money, to the extent that we're going to see money over the next couple of months come in, it's going to be late. I mean, it's late. A Square, welcome back, Sam, MR Crew. Thanks for shows last week and covering another horrible event in Texas, making causes plain and clear. Sam, perfect guest for today, old enough to know how the well-oiled propaganda machine can generate the talking points quickly and its effectiveness. I'm not as sanguine as Klein that the signs are encouraging, but she's been in the front lines and we need encouragement, so I'll take it. Pat from KC. I think with how well Emma handled last week that Sam can start taking Thursdays off again. Well, we'll see how that goes. Only answer, starting a new job today. Can I get a shofar for that? And my 1-year-old son's birthday from Friday. Love the show. Keep up the good work. Left is best. Yes. Happy birthday to your 1-year-old son. And congrats on the new job. Madonna 816. Do y'all know you're not streaming on Facebook? I did not know that. Belly Mike, Gina Carano signed a movie deal with your boy Ben Shapiro. I know it. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. That's going to
be a great movie.
When she is older, she's going to look back on that signature and think that's when my career ended.
Wait, Gina Carano?
Yeah.
What signature?
When she signed with Ben Shapiro's movie production company.
I mean, yeah, I think it ended when she was posting anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and QAnon nonsense.
I feel like she could have backed off that. I don't know.
It sucks because she's a good character in Mandalorian, and I thought she was badass. I was like, oh, because usually all the women are, it's like supermodels, but we're supposed to believe they're tough. I believe she was tough, but she's also an idiot.
JC, hey, in Minneapolis, we had a city council hearing about 10 years ago and having our own energy delivery as we had done with the internet. Excel Energy gave management employees the day off to show huge numbers in opposition. I imagine few of them lived in the city. The measure failed. Sally Rooney, with the benefit of hindsight, what's your opinion of the Russiagate story? Do you wish you had been more measured instead of going all in? Well, send a link, please.
Did you go all in?
No.
Yeah, Matt, and Michael were going to resign from the show if Sam didn't tone down his Russiagate conspiracies.
We had Marcy Klein on to talk about Marcy Wheeler, to talk about, geez, I don't know what's wrong with me today. We had Marcy Wheeler on. We had her on maybe 4 times, maybe 4 times to talk about that. But we were talking about the investigation. There were people who were indicted and there were people who went to jail, people who got pardoned. And I think if you go back and listen to those interviews, we're talking about an investigation that was real. The investigation was real. As far as the idea that Donald Trump was working for Russia, I think the working theory that we had from literally day one was the closest we came to it was they got some, they went to the guys who steal their credit cards that they buy their credit cards from and say, can you guys, crunch some data for us or hack into these places? But I'm not even clear on I
just don't even think you went that hard. I mean, I'm not trying to, I wasn't with the show at that point, but I mean, I think my recollection is that you guys were similar to had a similar perspective to me, which is just the investigation's happening. You have to comment on it, but speculating wildly, that was more of a cable news project. And I didn't think it was the biggest story.
We had 1,000 shows we probably did over those 4 years, maybe more. I don't know. And we had 4 shows that you could say was dedicated, 4 interviews that was dedicated to the thing. I mean, this is also, it is this type of revisionism that I think is a function of showing, that the problem is that these people want us to be more mad that Rachel Maddow was doing a lot of Russiagate shows. And I just didn't really care.
Show me a daily show that did less Russia coverage than us, I would say.
It definitely doesn't reflect well on her.
Well, I agree, but I'm not that heavily invested in it. I'm not the one who got bumped from her show, who used to be on her show and then didn't get invited back and got all pissy about it. That's not me. I was never on her show.
Who are you talking about?
Well, I mean, people can go look at do the math.
I mean, look, that's
what Glenn's pissed about.
Oh, okay.
There are people still who think the whole thing was an attack by the deep state on Donald Trump, and that anybody who covered it in any way is feeding into State Department propaganda or imperialism or whatever.
Right. They're lunatics.
I don't agree with them. I also just don't care that much because I don't think it's that important. But somehow that transforms into, I'm some kind of a tool for MSDNC.
It depended how you covered it, right? I mean, if you were saying that this is why you need to retaliate against Russia, and if you were saying that he was some sort of Manchurian candidate, yeah, I think that's unhinged. And I didn't like Rachel's coverage. And I thought it was just conspiracy peddling, but done on a different scale. But
And I would also say, the idea, when Glenn came on the show and we talked about this and he thought it was legitimate to cover and he thought it was legitimate to invite Marcy Wheeler on the show. And the skepticism to the extent, I think we expressed the proper amount of skepticism about the whole thing by, Michael would make fun of Rachel, Russia, that type of thing. Of course. But the idea that Glenn came on the show and was the atomic, the atomic science is nuclear clock is at 2 minutes before. And he was attributing that all to the thing. Now, of course, that was not what the scientists were attributing that moving the clock to. It was more about North Korea. But the idea that the implications of all of that anti-Russia stuff, isn't now when we're supposed to be isn't now when Biden, according to the the people who are still trading on this like sort of like notion of how Russiagate completely warped our society. Look, this person says like it impacted the life of this Russian American. I feel for you. I'm not in favor of what Rachel Maddow was doing any more than like, what we saw with attack on, Muslims in the wake of 9/11, although I would imagine, I don't know if it's as dramatic, but the implications of this, we were told, were like, it's going to start World War III. Where's that happening? Like, it was clearly like, this is, for them, it was like a OJ trial. And that's what cable news very often does. They follow these stories that they know that are, it's clickbaity. It's the same stuff. And do I think it paid off politically? I think it probably, there's no way to say, there's no way to decipher this. But I think it's possible it saved 10 million people getting Medicaid. I think it's arguable whether or not John McCain, who was all in on that, votes for the repeal of the ACA if none of that existed.
Okay, but politically, in terms of motivating voters, I think it had zero effect.
Zero effect.
Massive waste of time.
Yeah. Massive waste of time. But I do think it's possible that it impacted that one vote, and that's 10 million people getting Medicaid.
Yeah, I mean, I think McCain's narcissism also had more to do with it.
I don't think that it would. It took a lot of factors. I'm not saying it's the only factor. I mean, but yes, his narcissism, but it was also fueled on some level. I mean, he fully bought into it.
Maybe if Trump had never attacked McCain's military record, we wouldn't have this.
That's
true,
too.
It's a lot of this is like what ifs, and I think overall a more comprehensive set of hearings on Trump's corruption, not limited to Russia, would have been a lot more effective than what we saw.
To the extent that I have any type of like conspiracy thing, I've talked about this a couple of times, any type of like conspiratorial thinking about it, completely speculative. I think what happens, there are, and I think this happened with Benghazi on some level too. I think Benghazi I think that annex was involved in somehow like shipping arms in some fashion into Libya, and or maybe into Syria. I'm not sure. I have no idea. But like when there are things that are off limit to the public, what happens is that people in government take advantage of that. When they know there are areas that are not going to be talked about, they take advantage of that because you can't explain it. You can't connect the dots because one of the dots is top secret.
Benghazi too. Well, I know less so, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I meant. Benghazi. That's why I brought up Benghazi. But and I'm convinced that like there's some issue with the New York FBI office, and that there's a totally different story here that has more has to do with money laundering and all this other stuff that they keep having to work around. Like, why didn't Mueller go into Donald Trump's financials? Like, how do you do that investigation and not dig into his financials? I don't know. We're going to find out, I think, some stuff from this Manhattan DA. I don't think it's going to be he's working for Vladimir Putin, but I think there's going to be some corruption that may implicate people in, like, maybe in law enforcement. You're running a guy like Felix Seder. Like I say, it's my Whitey Bulger theory, but it's just a theory. But I don't consider that Russiagate in any way. It's, and anti-nuke Sam Seder. While somewhat get what Klein said on nuclear, but isn't solar somewhat centralized too? They don't have the power plants, maybe, but the production requires specialized manufacturing more so than wind does, for example. Battery manufacturing is similar. Don't buy her centralization argument. I think the centralization argument is, I think that's pretty legit. I mean, you make the equipment and then you sell it and then you're done. You don't profit off it. It's a one-time profit. I would check out Andreas Malm. I'm going to have him on the show. I did an interview and we may end up playing it on the show. But once you build that equipment, it's over. It's your profit, your ability to profit off it is done. I think the biggest issue with nuclear is and this wouldn't be as big of an issue. Like, it heavily relies on government subsidies. Fine. I don't trust the corporations who make this stuff to make it in such a way that they're not cutting corners. That's basically it. And I have spoken, not in public, but to guys who are involved in designing it. And they were like, we didn't do it right. And there were other options, but they didn't want to switch because it was too expensive. The GE stuff. Matty Moron, nuclear is going to be an essential part of any realistic decarbonization. A lot of the risks have been reduced by the technology used to make newer generation reactors. Yes, that is true. But most of the ones we have are still based on that GE model. I don't think anyone would argue we should be allowing private companies to develop a new nuclear power infrastructure, both in terms of the risk of dangerous failures and storage of waste. Indeed, it needs to be part of a massive public takeover of the energy grid. Yes. Now, if that comes with it, if this becomes strictly a government enterprise, I'm far more interested.
Doubtful.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's also, that is that's the problem.
I don't understand. I mean, like, there are people who are incredibly skeptical of corporate malfeasance who have huge blind spots when it comes to nuclear, and I'm flummoxed by it.
Like, it's one thing to say, like, hey, they're a little bit sloppy with the way that they're making this or that, and they're cutting corners because they're making profits off it. It's another to say, like, oh, in this instance, you could lose like a quarter of the population if that happens or something.
Yeah, and it's not analogous to solar in that what Sam said is that they manufacture the panels and then people are largely responsible for then their own kind of energy consumption, as opposed to nuclear where there's multi-step processes, including that very scary waste element.
Prog Rocker, there is no way the left can maintain power and influence to fight neoliberal entities when these opportunities present themselves. In order to maintain a deep bench, to do this requires the same level of financial resources that the right maintains. As you said, they can weather the storm of public opinion and continue their dominance afterwards. So in order to fight them, you have to accrue the same level of wealth that they have. And in doing so, you just become like them. As you can tell, I'm very pessimistic and could see no way to win until everything collapses and then rebuild from scratch. Although human nature being what it is, the same dynamic repeats. Well, that's pessimistic. Really cool. Must find a way to inform fossil fuel workers of the just transition in the new Green Deal. In the Green New Deal. Why? Maybe I'm having a stroke. Sam, Sam, the Green New Deal is combining the New Deal with the contemporary green infrastructure. Yes, I do know that. But I literally couldn't even read it when you said that. Emil's Clark's eyebrows. Is Dave Rubin visually transforming into Don Jr. or is Don Jr. transforming into Dave Rubin? Moon in the Lake. By the way, no one says Chicago's like the New York of Midwest. What a weird thing to say. It is sort of a weird thing to say, isn't
I've
it?
never heard that either. Yeah.
They call it the second city.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it described as like a cross between Boston and New York. Like it has some of the scale of New York.
I've never heard that either.
All right, well,
it's a very New York centric way of looking at the world.
I've heard that from somebody from New York who's lived in both Boston and Chicago, so that's probably why.
Kid Test. Really enjoyed Adam Curtis documentary. Wish I could fall asleep during or after. I'm usually terrified sitting up until 4 a.m. He also seems to push a personal libertarianism with a strong social structure And that seems really difficult to do.
You know, we went back and forth about what his message really is. And I don't know. I feel like he's kind of like a show like The Wire, where they just do a really good job laying out all of the problems and all of the systems, but they don't really take a position on it. And I think Curtis is a leftist on some level. But like, if you might be a shit lib, like if you can't tell if someone is or is not a shit lib from watching their show, I'm talking about David Simon, the creator of The Wire, who you should not follow on Twitter if you want to still respect him or like him.
It's very sad.
I don't know, leaves something to be desired. But at the same time, I think people conflate, like, Curtis acknowledges the failures of 20th century revolutions in a way that pisses off some more orthodox Marxist-Leninists or whatever. But I don't think the message is ultimately that we shouldn't keep trying.
Yeah.
I think the message is we need a new kind of collective action, hopefully. But, I don't know. I could be wrong.
Yeah, he seems to think that the future that we're moving towards and the solutions that are necessary to provide like a common, decent living for people have not been imagined yet. It seems to be the resolution I get at each of the end of his movies. And he's excited to see what it is.
Yeah. Like, it's possible to take a pessimistic message from it or an optimistic one, I think. Either you could say, wow, everything's screwed up and everyone who's ever tried to unscrew it has only, screwed things up worse. Or you could say, wow, this system's really messed up. We need to change literally everything.
I think that's kind of the point of art in some ways, right? To lay out problems or depict them correctly, and then people can draw their own conclusions, right? Yeah. That's what artists tend to say. I'm not one.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I want a little more than that out of any art that
you have more of an
political.
activist perspective, right?
Yeah.
I do too. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, analysis can be political in that sense without necessarily being prescriptive. I thought, like, in hypernormalization, there was a lot of like lamenting the loss of a communitarian feeling.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And he also shows how easy it is for leftist movements to be recuperated by the system. But
spoiler alert.
But I don't think that ultimately means that we should give up on leftist movements. We should just be aware of that,
Right. I mean, I think, part of what Naomi, I think, was arguing today was like, you just, by hook or crook, you got to keep these things on the shelves and at the ready and be ready for an opportunity.
Yeah. And parts of his analysis really do point in a leftist direction. Like, he shows how liberalism leads to fascism, which is a thing that people like to say all the time, right? Fascism is capitalism in decay, but it's actually kind of complicated to show it. And I think he does a very good job at that.
What is the name of it?
Oh, the BBC series?
Yeah.
Can't Get You Out of My Head.
Can't Get You Out of My Head.
Cool. Thanks.
You can find it on YouTube. Where did you watch it?
I had a link to a website where I watched it for free. I can post it on Twitter. I know I'm probably not supposed to, but
I found it on YouTube. You can search for it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I guess it's on BBC. I couldn't find it on. I would have paid for it, but I couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah, same.
The old ones are streaming on Prime as well, although they rendered them wrong, so they look like crap.
No.
Idiots.
As long as we still have all that amazing music.
Look, listen. This is really tough stuff to talk about, and maybe we shouldn't even wrap the show this way. But Jack Dorsey is at it again, folks, and he is preventing you from being exposed to the wisdom that is Eric Weinstein. And let's put up this tweet thread. This is pretty hard-hitting stuff. Now, what's weird isn't Eric's last name spelled W-H-I-N-E? Stein?
I'm not the resident Jewish scholar here, so you'd have to inform us about.
I believe it's because it's Weinstein, isn't it? Whine. Let's. That was a little bit of a joke. Nobody seemed to get that.
I got it.
All right. Well, appreciate you holding in the laughter. Let's zoom in a little bit on what he says here, so that we can get a good view. May I ask, Jack, how and why are you throttling my account?
That's weird.
Why some posts and not others? It's not like I haven't been here for more than 10 years and know the engagement patterns. Why distort my communication? To what purpose? This isn't like you. This was never your goal. How bat crap insane? Like, it's almost like definitional, right? Like, I mean, this would be if I was working at a facility and someone handed me this tweet, I would go like, oh yeah, this guy's got a real, we've got a serious narcissism disorder that's going on here. The idea that this guy is, first of all, must have like his, like these graphs of all of his engagement patterns up. Is this the next one? Next in the series of the tweets. He's upset. He's not getting the attention he needs. What is this? Go zoom in. Is this about what was hinted at the Time magazine article about fortifying our democracy? I read between the lines as best I could. I mean, honestly, like, I would be concerned if this guy was in my family. I would be concerned. This is time for an intervention. Is this the idea that there's an industry-wide working group that manages us all, and independent, unaligned thinkers are merely collateral damage? What is he talking about?
A screenshot of his whatever that is being suspended. That's the name of his show, Articles of Unity.
I don't get it. Here's another zip in. I don't know what that Articles of Unity is about.
It's a terrible name.
Please unthrottle this account. You know what? I got to get in touch with YouTube too, because I think they're I think they're throttling us. I feel like we should be at 2 million subscribers.
YouTube,
now,
this isn't like you.
This is not like you.
You're better than this.
So much better than this.
You're embarrassing yourself.
Now it's enough, and making me say this to you in public when you won't respond in private is embarrassing to us both. I don't want to be doing this. Thank you.
It's embarrassing to somebody.
Honestly, how is that not an indication that there's something very emotionally wrong with this guy?
Also, when you said that, I just remembered that verified accounts, I heard about this feature. I've never checked it, but I guess because we're verified, we're hot shit here. We can check engagement on our tweets. I've never done it, but I guess we know that it's done by Eric Weinstein quite a bit.
Derek Davison, I guess, tweeted out, Eric, please don't stop tweeting about this until Jack takes action. Honestly.
Can you, I mean, now that I remember this feature exists, we can probably guess there are some Twitter personalities who check their engagement on their personal account regularly, don't we think?
I honestly, I have no idea what that feature is, but nevertheless, maybe, this guy's not the math genius that he thinks he is, that he's been able to sort of track his engagement. Maybe also he's just completely out of his mind.
Again, yeah, he tweets like a crazy ant.
When you're that concerned with your Twitter engagements, you really need to get a life.
Oh my God, right? I mean, honestly,
doesn't he have children and things like that, like a family?
I don't know if he does.
Twitter's my child now.
But here's the real. There's one other theory. Andy Kaufman. He's really Andy Kaufman. It's really the only other explanation.
I would buy it. I would enjoy that outcome.
I would be psyched.
Be pretty.
Honestly, I'll say this publicly, Eric, if this is performance art, you're a genius. End of story. This is Honestly,
you think it's like the Joaquin Phoenix thing from like a year or so back, when he pretended to have lost his mind, be a rapper, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I'm gonna say like I don't know how I could like pay homage, but if this is a performance piece, it's fucking brilliant. Pitch perfect, nailed it. All right, let's do a couple IMs so we get out of here. Prairie Fire Kowalski, hey Sam, Emma, MR crew. Can the deep voice be a regular thing on Tuesday? It was pretty funny. Also, nice work on making it look like a natural cause, Sam, by timing it with a national emergency was pro-gamer move. They're always much less toxic now. All else, Emma did a pretty good job hosting, but one of the constructive criticism, there was not enough sports talk. In particular, not enough praise of Tom Brady.
I can't do more sports talk because you are in the minority. I'm telling you. I think most of the audience really doesn't like it.
Yeah, get out of here with that stuff. Come on.
I talked about the Eagles for like 3 minutes.
Austin Bernie Bro, question for Jamie. How far should unions go in defending jobs, not workers, but opportunities for work? Thinking about Trumpka criticizing the shutdown of Keystone XL because good jobs are lost.
I mean, yeah, sometimes the greater social good bumps up against the short-term narrow interests of a business union. And what do you do when that happens? Well, I mean, we need to be building class power. We need to be doing the rank and file strategy, which is a thing that has been, breathlessly reported on by conservative outlets. But basically what that means is socialists getting good union jobs and becoming active in their unions to try to bring more of a social vision for, the world outside of just their own narrow interests. But workers, unions need to be building power, and workers need to be building power so that they have the option and the luxury of taking the long view on certain things of what's actually going to be beneficial for all of society, including themselves. So, we got our work cut out for us, and that's probably not a complete answer, but we're definitely going to talk more about it this week on the Antifada Twitch stream with Sean, aka As a Worker, who knows a lot about labor.
Lawyer adjacent, just hypothetically speaking, if I lived in a state where people prided themselves on being independent Alamo last stand types and Second Amendment remedies, my electric company sent me $10,000 bill, I would simply begin Googling addresses. They did do something after the 2011 report as AG Greg Abbott sued to stop winterization. Ellie Voigt, the far right and fascists are always on top of new tech, which adds to the financial asymmetry between left and right. For instance, the podcast, I Don't Speak German, they delved into the far right's use of early internet in the 80s. The far right flooded the internet from the beginning. Another example is cryptocurrency, which basically allows the far right to secure venture capital and manipulate unregulated markets to make huge amounts of money. The left should be focusing on tech, blockchain, developing in these new areas rather than being distracted by cultural projects that rely on appealing to the good conscience of politicians. The left co-ops need to take advantage of and be first in emerging tech, thinking of worker-owned solar and wind harvesting installation, credit unions using decentralized finance pools using crypto, mesh networks for community-run decentralized Wi-Fi, which is active in New York. Yes, that's true, actually. Just a few ideas. Do you guys know that? The mesh, I'm trying to think of what the site is.
Oh, yeah. I know about it because they have a project like that at Woodbine Space.
There is Wi-Fi that basically it may or may not be in your area because you need people, obviously, the connectivity, like you need literally people who are using it in a building, a couple blocks from you to sort of spread it around your neighborhood. I got to find that website. Misophonic sleeper. Emma, try brown noise for sleep, low rumbling hides, city noise, and my neighbor's sleep apnea.
Oh, nice.
Rube Davin should be mispronounce C actions. And the final I am of the day, Matt, if you're listening, stop listening and enjoy your vacation. MR crew, any thoughts on Alexandra Rojas calling Joe Manchin divisive for opposing Neera Tanden? It has been my theory from the beginning that Neera Tanden was put up as a as bait to, sometimes like the best I can express it is this. When I was writing scripts for networks, for development, I would always put in one or two scenes or something like that were purposefully written to be cut out so that I could give them one or two. And so they could say, like, this scene where the guy is all of a sudden talking about his grandmother, like, what do we really need that in? And then we also, is there any way to like get rid of the sister? And I'm like, well, I think the sister's pretty important, but now that you say it, that scene where he's talking about the grandfather, yeah, that's a mistake. Thank you for that. Yeah, that is a very helpful note. And well, now they're saying, but Jen Psaki's saying, I know she's a paid liar, as they all are, but like, she's saying they're whipping votes for her. They're making a bunch of calls. They think they can get it because now Mitt Romney's joined. Now it's Collins, Romney, and I don't think they ever get into a situation where they have one plan. I think they look at these things and say, like, this can go this way or that way, and we're going to win either way. And I think there's probably a fear amongst progressive organizations that the next nominee after Neera Tanden is going to be worse.
Dayan seemed to say in his newsletter that a progressive was up, if potentially, and I forget the name, and I just saw the headline, so it escapes me, but could be up. So I don't really know. I think honestly, it's a win-win. If Manchin is doing this, sinking Tanden's nomination, I have no love for her as a way to like put forth his personal branding as,
right,
bucking the Biden administration, and then is going to, as has been suggested by some Democratic operatives, vote for the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. I will take that and savor it. I would in a heartbeat. I'm offering an explanation that occurs to me that, and maybe on some level, they're operating in the same fashion as Joe Manchin. We give you this one, Joe Biden, and we get a different one. I don't know.
I just think it's funny that her tweets are actually getting her in trouble.
I saw someone put it well, though. It's like she's not, people joking, and this is a loss for posting everywhere, right? Like posters.
Posters' rights.
But someone said she's not just like a poster, she's a boss. And that was the issue, was that she's somebody who had a lot of power and used her platform to be a bully. And I think
she's a huge enemy of the left as well. So
yeah, that's not Joe Manchin's interest, but yes, I agree. Right. Final IM of the day. ASIAC, shout out to the state of New Jersey and its awful lawmakers for finally actually legalizing weed. We beat you, New York. Jamie, Emma, Brendan held down the fort all by his lonesome today. Great job, everybody. Thank you
Kyle,
also,
too.
Kyle, for backing us up. See you guys tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.